It's Sunday, April 6th, and I have a little bit of time to talk about how the protests in Portland went yesterday before I have to walk down the street to my Congresswoman's town hall at Parker's Middle School. I meant to film this yesterday, but I did two protests yesterday, and by the time I got home, I was absolutely cashed out. I spent some time knitting and listening to my audiobook and hanging out with my kids, and then I fell asleep before 9 p.m. and I never got to film my update, so here it is. I actually have a lot of things I want to say about the protests and the media response, etc. So I'll probably break it down over several videos today, both here and on my backup. And if you watch this on YouTube, I'll probably squish them all together in one compilation video. So first off, according to the Alt National Park Service, there were more than 5 million Americans who turned out all over the country to protest Donald Trump, Elon Musk, the rise of fascism, and to defend democracy and our way of life. I'll go into this more in another video, but legacy media continues to insist that it was thousands of Americans. It was millions. There were millions of us. I started out in the morning at the East Portland location. It was hosted by East Portland Indivisible. That is the chapter that I'm a part of. Based on RSVPs, I think we expected about 400 people, but there was some sweet grandma who made it her mission at the event to walk all the way down this block and down this way and back up this way and this way and do an official head count. And she counted 819 people. That's not including our Congresswoman Maxine Dexter, who came and spoke and marched with us the entire way. Myself and several other people volunteered to be safety marshals, but honestly, y'all, the only thing that we had to do was direct traffic. We met at a U.S. post office location because obviously we're all really worried about what Trump wants to do to the post office. And in a busy part of town in East Portland, because we're trying to raise awareness and have people see that we really care about our community, we really care about democracy, and we're deeply concerned about all of the ways that Musk and Trump have their grubby little hands all over our government. So we picked an area of high visibility and a lot of traffic, but honestly, all of the cars were really respectful and really patient as we would have to let people cross driveways. And we were like, hang on a second. There's folks marching. Everybody was super great. There were hundreds of cars that were honking their horns in solidarity and waving at us and cheering for us. We started at the post office on Stark and 102nd by the Starbucks, and we made a big loop all the way down by Mall 205 and then came back. And honestly, on that whole walk, we only encountered 3 people who were not happy about what we were doing. They were all white men, I have to say. 2 of them were in big pickup trucks, and they flipped us off. But that was it. 3 people flipped us off. There was no presence of agitators. There were no counter protesters. There was nobody there heckling us or giving us a hard time. 3 people, that's it. And hundreds of people honking in solidarity. Loads of goodwill amongst the group, families with little kids, people brought their dogs, people were blowing bubbles, people had really interesting signs that they made, folks were dressed up. A lot of folks I noticed were wearing patriotic outfits. There has been this movement amongst indivisible groups and in the resistance in general to kind of reclaim the American flag and reclaim what America is from the fascists and for the people. And I really appreciate that because this is our country and it's our flag. I would have to say the largest demographic represented was absolutely boomers. And it's not just that older folks are worried about their own Social Security and Medicare and perhaps, veterans benefits. They're really worried about the entire country. They're worried about the freedoms of everybody. They're worried about immigrants. They're worried about our First Amendment rights. They're worried about the children and what kind of country we are giving to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They're worried about our natural resources, the environment. Loads of grannies were out there worried about women's rights, worried about our right to reproductive freedom. That event was just really positive. I felt really encouraged by everybody that I talked to, and it just felt like there was so much goodwill building throughout the event. So when that wrapped up, a big cohort of us walked up the block and took the Max and went downtown to the really big protest. There were more than 100 protests around Oregon, and it's important to have those small protests. I'll talk about this in another video, but red rural Oregon really showed up. Very deeply red counties had large turnouts at their protests. So just around the Portland area, there were protests everywhere. Southeast, where we were in outer Southeast, down in Tigard, there was a big protest. Up in Vancouver, Washington, Esther Short Park had over 3,000 people. But we all wanted to go join the protest that was starting a little bit later in the day at downtown Portland along the waterfront. I was supposed to meet my daughter when I got downtown, but once I got off the Max and got to the waterfront, I realized there were way more than the initial prediction of 10,000 people. One of the organizers said they estimated it was over 30,000 people, but I've not seen the official count yet. So I tried to call my daughter and the calls would just fail over and over again. I don't know if the cell towers were overwhelmed because there were so many people downtown. And I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna actually go up in this parking garage. I saw that it was full of protesters who were watching the crowd over the waterfront. I thought maybe I can get a better cell signal up here. I know I still couldn't get a call to go through, but I had this bird's eye view all the way down the street and back this way and up and over the bridge. There were so many people. There were people on all the bridges cheering. There was a drum line that was getting set up to go. And I thought, okay, I will just have to find my daughter later and I will just go march. So I walked down the 5 flights of stairs or whatever with all of these other folks. And you could see that the crowd was starting to begin to want to move down the street. Like the gathering phase was kind of over and we were getting ready for the marching phase. And you could feel that people were really angry. They were really pissed off about what the government was doing, but also this really palpable sense of goodwill, of hope. People were friendly to each other, kind to each other. Folks were complimenting each other's outfits and their very ingenious signs, like really witty signs. People with cowbells and tambourines and bubbles and lots of folks with drums. Loads and loads of people with their children, loads of people with their dogs. Folks of all ages. I would say age-wise, this was a much more diverse group. If folks were wondering where the Gen Zers were, they were in downtown Portland. But also lots and lots of boomers, lots of people's grandmas and grandpas out with their walkers and their canes in the blazing sunshine. People who should be enjoying their retirements. Donald Trump has stolen that from them. Instead, they are giving their all to try and save democracy for future generations. So I was marching for about 20 minutes and regretting my choice to wear all black a little bit as we were in the bright sunshine. I should say I was wearing a backpack with extra supplies in it. And if I had to do it over again, so I packed first aid kit, extra nitrile gloves, snacks, extra masks, water. A friend gave me sunscreen to carry. Things I thought, people might need. If I have to do this over again, or I will do it over again, I'm sure, I'm going to put a sign on my backpack so people know all of those things are in there. If they need them, just ask, right? Instead, I would hear somebody complaining about sunscreen. I'd be like, oh, I've got some. Do you need some? Or I would just say, is anybody hungry? I have granola bars. And people took me up on that, but I'm going to put a sign on my backpack next time. Anyway, I'd been marching for about 20 minutes when my kid came and tackled me from behind. I was like, how did you find me? And she's like, oh, well, it's a good thing that you're 6 feet tall and you have that easily recognizable fuck-ass bob. Which is true. It's so true. Anyway, so thank goodness I'm tall. She was able to find me. I would never have been able to find her in that crowd. So we got to march together the whole way. We went up and over the bridge and we went into downtown Southeast and then we turned around and we came back and all the way back down to the waterfront. I mean, there were tens of thousands of people marching. Once we got up on the bridge, I turned around and looked back and you could just see people were still just streaming down the street, waiting for their turn to get up onto the bridge. And then people were coming back the other way. There were just an absolute flood of people. Again, lots of positive goodwill. As you marched along, there were people resting along the sides who were cheering you on and were leading chants. And I should clarify for people who aren't from Portland, we shut down the highway. That's the bridges that we were marching on. So it meant that cars on the on-ramps to the highway, they just had to stop and wait for hours until we were done. And they weren't ticked off. They all had their windows down. Some had signs. They were all chanting. Some were getting out of their cars, cheering for us. There were 18-wheelers who were honking their horns and waving and cheering. I did not see one heckler, one counter-protester anywhere. I also saw no more than half a dozen cops the entire time. It was very peaceful. It was very family friendly. And I will say at the first event I went to in the morning, the cops thanked us for how peaceful and organized we were, how the volunteers did a really good job directing traffic and keeping everybody safe. And then for the big protest downtown, like a police presence just really wasn't even needed. The event itself had volunteers that helped direct traffic and make sure that folks stayed on the route. I just want to hammer home how much this was a non-violent, peaceful, family-friendly event. So if this regime tries to say otherwise, they're full of shit. So besides the peaceful nature of the event, my big takeaways were that it really built a sense of hope and solidarity. People realized that we are not alone. Right? You can say the power lies with the people, but until you see the people turn out, you don't realize what that actually means. You don't realize how huge of a movement this is, which is why it's so important that we have events like this. A physical, visual demonstration of how strong the resistance is. Millions of us marching at what is just the beginning of the resistance movement. I took tremendous courage from yesterday, and I hope that you did too. Okay, I have lots more to cover today, so come back.